For this
Wait till this
institution, I'm not
child
aware
comes.
that we have any adult learners.
Literally, it's like a pile of baby. This is
Like
not.
call the meeting
not-
to order.
This is not
But we
exactly.
have on
right.
occasion.
Yeah. Sometime wait.
Oh, sorry.
October.
Nice.
Are we going to interrupt this with a meeting?
Yes, please.
Oh, okay.
Wow. We're chatting away.
I'd like to call the meeting to order for the Bellas Falls Union High School District. Any adjustments to the agenda?
I do not.
We'd like to review and approve board minutes for August 12th. Any changes? I have a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
All those in favor?
Hi.
Aye.
Hi.
Opposed?
Because we're at.
Indifferent.
Minutes are approved. Communication and public comments. Doesn't appear to be any. Policy committees.
On the policy committee, and I've already sent out a doodle poll for the board members who are on the policy committee. We're looking at September 25th at 5 o'clock. That's right before the next SU meeting. So I'll check that to see it, and then the doodle poll that I put out there to see if that works. So I'll be in touch with that, but I'm shooting for 5 o'clock on September 25th to start working on some new policies and revisions to some current ones.
Thank you. Superintendent's report.
Well, we're off and running this for this school year, so I just kind of wanted to give everyone an overview of what have we been doing, not just recently, but what we're focusing on throughout this school year. We've really started off with some professional development for administrators through Landmark College, and let's go down with that. And so the initial training was for all the administrative team. We spent 2 half days at Landmark College, and the topic was universal classroom and neurodiversity. And we started off with the administrators going through a kind of like a shortened version of the training, because we're going to have one regular ed teacher and one special ed teacher from each building working with Landmark this year, and it's going to be all about neurodiversities in universal classroom. These are just some pictures from the training that the leadership team had at Landmark. Because what we're hoping is, as we continue to do this, that we're really growing a partnership with Landmark to provide some, continue to provide us with professional development around universal classroom, proficiency-based learning, because they're on the cutting edge and they've been doing it for a long time. So that was, we spent 2 days of that during our admin retreat. And I'm going to show you a couple of really short videos in a little bit. I believe 2. One's on the universal classroom and one's on Tier 1 restorative practices. So in addition, we started the year off, we had our opening meeting, and then we had training in Tier 1 restorative practices, which is the circles, and it's just all about communicating with students, getting adults used to communicating with students, opening circles in the mornings or throughout the day to really open up build relationships, teachers and students building relationships. And so we had, as you know, we have our restorative practices K through 12 this year in the SU, and the middle school and the high school came together in the cafeteria, and they went through how to start a circle, how to lead a circle, and that training was provided by Mr. Hall, our restorative practices coordinator, and the Justice Center. So we learned a lot from that, but these are some pictures from that day. This here is all the middle school and the high school in the cafeteria working together. They were all in circles. Another thing that we're working on this year, and Chris will speak a little bit more in his report, I believe he might be, is MAPS testing. Is the MAPS testing measured academic progress, which is the K through you want to say K through 12, but really it's K through 9 this year and K through 10 next year for measured academic progress. That's what MAP stands for. And that's a common local assessment that we have to have in regards to the state statute. We have to have a common local assessment. So we do have that now. So beyond that, what I want to do is share with you, first of all, like I said, each of these are very quick, but we don't have a long agenda tonight, so I thought this would be a perfect opportunity just to go over and just have you watch a few short. This one's 4 minutes, and and it's on what is universal design in a school.
This teacher needs to meet a curriculum goal, and she's got a very diverse group of students. And so does this teacher. And this one. Most do.
You have
In
more
fact, research shows
volume?
that the way
About
people
as high as I
learn
can get
is
it to
as
go
unique
without
as their fingerprints.
speakers.
What does this mean for teachers of today?
Is that better?
Classrooms are highly diverse, and curriculum needs to be designed from the start to meet this diversity. Universal design for learning is an approach to curriculum that minimizes barriers and maximizes learning for all students. Whoa, that's a fancy term. Universal design for learning. Let's unpack it a bit. Let's think about the word universal. By universal, we mean curriculum that can be used and understood by everyone. Each learner in a classroom brings her own background, strengths, needs, and interests. Curriculum should provide genuine learning opportunities for each and every student. Now let's think about the word learning. Learning is not one thing. Neuroscience tells us that our brains have 3 broad networks. One for recognition, the what of learning, one for skills and strategies, the how of learning, and one for caring and prioritizing, the why of learning. Students need to gain knowledge, skills, and enthusiasm for learning, and a curriculum needs to help them do all 3. But every learner is unique, and one size does not fit all. So how do we make a curriculum that challenges and engages diverse learners? This is where the word design comes in. A universally designed building is planned to be flexible and to accommodate all kinds of users, with and without disabilities. It turns out that if you design for those in the margins, your building works better for everyone. Curb cuts and ramps are used by people in wheelchairs, people with strollers, and people on bikes. Captioning on TV serves people who are deaf, people learning English, people in gyms, and spouses who get to sleep at different times. UDL takes this idea and applies it to the design of flexible curriculum. UDL goes beyond access because we need to build in support and challenge. So how do we use the UDL framework to make learning goals, methods, materials, and assessments that work for everyone? First, ask yourself, what is my goal? What do I want my students to know, do, and care about? Then ask, what barriers in the classroom might interfere with my diverse students reaching these goals? To eliminate the barriers, use the 3 UDL principles to create flexible paths to learning so that each student can progress. Number 1, provide multiple means of representation. Present content and information in multiple media and provide varied supports. Use graphics and animation, highlight the critical features, activate background knowledge, and support vocabulary so that students can acquire the knowledge being taught. Number 2, provide multiple means of action and expression. Give students plenty of options for expressing what they know and provide models, feedback, and supports for their different levels of proficiency. Number 3, provide multiple means of engagement. What fires up one student won't fire up another. Give students choices to fuel their interests and autonomy. Help them risk mistakes and learn from them. If they love learning, they will persist through challenges. And remember, always keep in mind the learning goal. Get rid of barriers caused by the curriculum and keep the challenge where it belongs. And that's it. Okay, quick recap. Show the information in different ways. Allow your students to approach learning tasks and demonstrate what they know in different ways. And offer options that engage students and keep their interest. Universal design for learning equals learning opportunities for all. For more information on UDL, go to www.cast.org.
So that's Universal Classroom, and that's, by watching that, you can understand why we want to work with Landmark on that. Because as we continue to get into proficiency-based learning, we want to make sure that all the learning is happening in the classrooms for all students, and we're not taking kids out of the classroom to get further instruction. And so that's the pretty much the course that one regular ed and one special ed teacher from each building will be taking. It's a very interactive course with Landmark, and we hope to continue to grow that. The other thing I did speak about was restorative practices. And we're starting, there's 3 different levels of restorative practices, 3 levels, and we're really starting on the first level, which is opening lines of communication and getting not just students used to speaking and talking to each other and sharing, but also with teachers. And so the training that we went through, like I said before, was Tier 1 circles, and I'm not going to show you this whole clip, but it's going to show you a few minutes of it, because it will give you a really good idea of what Tier 1 circles mean in the classroom. And we'll be doing this, K through 12. So this is a high school. I think they're in Detroit.
So thank you guys for participating this morning here. That was kind of last minute stuff, but I want to thank you guys for helping us do this training video for the teachers. Before we start, I'm going to go over the talking piece. And the way the circle works is by using the talking piece. And who's ever in possession of the talking piece is the only person that can talk. Okay? So I'm going to be asking a question, then I'll pass it to my left, and then that person will talk, and then when he's done, I'll go to the left until it gets back to me, okay? There's also some agreements. They're kind of like rules. Number 1 is respect the talking piece. Speak from the heart. Say your truth. Say what you feel. Listen from the heart, so do not judge anybody by what they say. Speak and listen with respect, so be very respectful to everybody in the circle and what they're saying. And honor confidentiality, so if somebody decides to share something about whatever we talk about, just keep it between the circle. Let's not go outside and, put it on Facebook or tell your friends or whatever, okay? Can I get a thumbs up if you guys agree with that? All right. So we're going to do an introductions. I want you to say your name, and if you could travel anywhere in the world, where would you go? Okay? So my name is Mr. Navarro. I work for I'm a program specialist for the district, and if I could go anywhere in the world, I think I would probably go to Spain.
My name is Fernando, and if I could go anywhere in the world, I would go to Hawaii.
My name is Juan. If I could go anywhere in the world, I'll go to Japan.
If I could go anywhere in the world, I would go to New York.
My name is Susan. If I could go anywhere in the world, I'll go to Chicago.
My name is Andrew, and if I could go anywhere in the world, I'd go to Spain.
My name is Sergio. If I could go anywhere in the world, I would go to Hawaii too.
My name is Nessie, so I can go anywhere in the world.
Cool, thank you guys. Thanks for participating in that. We're going to do a little activity before we jump into the discussion. So
Pretty much the main reason behind the circle is because it gives everyone an opportunity to speak if they want, and they have that talking piece. And every student has the right to pass if they don't want to talk. But you can imagine how powerful it can be if you have introverts and extroverts, and the main purpose of that is the listening, not necessarily the speaking. And so you're just trying to establish common grounds within the question that what is asked, but also keeping in mind, and as the one who is running the circle, that we have to be aware of our own biases as well. So the questions really have to be open, and what you're really hoping to do is establish, by doing the circle, is students and teachers, everyone's going to see that we do have things in common and share experiences. And the questions that can be asked are limitless. It can be, you can talk about, give me an example of would be on a homework assignment. What was the one thing that you took away from the homework assignment? or one thing that you liked or did not like about it, and then it starts opening these avenues of conversation with students in regards to, oh, we both had the same problem with the homework, and it gives a teacher a better idea. So you can imagine the level of digging deeper into the classroom and outside of just the testing and the academics. So it's about communication, it's about forming relationships, and that's what we're working on this year within the school. We're not going to get onto level, we may get into different tier 2, which is really bringing people together who have harmed each other. And level 3 is actually when a huge issue takes place and you want the community to be involved as well. Right now we just focus on the school levels and talking and establishing relationships. And there may be times throughout the year, especially at the high school and the middle school level, that because we have people who are trained, myself, Mr. Hall, that can bring people together to really work out the problems and discuss what happened rather than just saying, you know what, you're suspended, you go this way or you go this way. It's trying to find the right time to bring them together to resolve the problem so it doesn't happen again. So that's where we are. It's been a, I think for me anyways, a great start to the school year in regards to a lot of stuff we have going on. It's a lot of good stuff. It's all intertwined in what we're trying to do, and it's really, we're always looking at how do we improve the academics of students, but we really want to also start focusing on how can we improve the environment of the schools, get communication going between students and adults, and feeling that we're one community. So between the two, I think we'll get there. We're taking it slow and steady, and that's where we are right now in regards to the start of the school year. A lot of professional development has been going on. The most recent thing we had was through the Center of Professional Development Outreach with Mrs. and Dr. Wilkins, is that we offered some quick informational professional development on Google Classroom, Google Sites, and IXL Math, which is in the elementary levels. So we're out there, offering professional development here in district in SU now as well, because in the past teachers would have to travel or paras would have to travel to get this training. So that's another initiative we have, is providing professional development for all of our teachers and staff right here on the premises. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone have any questions for Chris?
I have a question, and that is, am I correct, Chris, that we're also offering professional development to other districts?
Yeah, we had the first one we had a couple months ago. We had not just our own SU, but I think we had through Southern Vermont, Central Vermont, we had about a total of 4 or 5 other SUs who participated in the professional development, which is good because it lessens the cost for us too, and we have other SUs paying in what we're offering. So,
thanks, Molly.
Thank you. Principal's report.
So I'll run off on one of the topics that Chris brought up, which is the MAPS testing. So we are really happy that this is happening in a K, at least through this year, through 9 through 10 next year. I will say that there isn't necessarily a lot of good information out there on how this testing is best served for 11th and 12th graders, and that's a longer conversation. But our freshman academy for years has been seeking kind of the best vehicle to get some. What this gives you is, it's called MAPS Growth. So it's a series of tests that, in this case, 9th graders will be taking within weeks, both in English Language Arts and in math. And they'll take it at the beginning of the year, at the middle of the year, and the end of the year, again, to measure the growth that's happening and then to help inform our work with those students. And especially with it being done over the course of time, we will be having 9th graders coming in that will have had years of this testing that we can compare to. So there's really a lot of good information to be gathered here. What I like about MAPS testing is what it also, so there's this English Language Arts standard test, you might say, and a math standard test. And it's computer adaptive testing, which is You take a question. If you get it right, it gives you a harder question. If you get it right, it gives you a harder question, so that it kind of funnels in on where your knowledge level is for both math and English language arts. Again, all of our ninth graders will be taking that. The MAPS
This year?
this year, yep. MAPS growth also includes similar kinds of tests focused on Algebra 1, and a different test focused on geometry, and a different test focused on Algebra 2. So within our math department, we can not just serve those ninth graders overall, but also the students that are taking the different levels of algebra and geometry and Algebra 2. So the interest is to also use this testing to help inform more precisely how we're serving students in those content areas. And there's also a MAPS growth test for science that's tied to the national, the next generation science standards, which is what our curriculum is tied to. So there's really a lot of great opportunities for this testing, which has kind of this universal design across the district, but is also going to serve us rather specifically in a few other content areas as well. So we've got that coming down the pike.
Chris,
yeah.
on that,
Yeah.
how do you, as administrator, evaluate the use, the very obviously clear use this testing has for the teaching and for the ongoing changes in curriculum against the clear and obvious cost in time that the student would be learning the next thing?
Right.
I mean, if we, there has been all this concern about lots of testing
Right.
and less learning.
Right.
How do you
So
measure
here's
that?
how we manage that. At the administrative level, there was a lot of conversation about who do we test. So, and I will say, we have done a lot of digging on the best practices for this type of testing at the high school level. And I was able to come across what I would describe as limited information on that. So to manage that, we start small. So we don't test 9, 10, 11, and 12 without a purpose. So I'll be able to answer that question better for you after we've done 1 year of testing and started with the ninth graders, because we don't want to lose a lot of instructional time. That's really what Mr. Pratt and I spent a good amount of time just this past week trying to figure out what's the best way to test these ninth graders and to minimize that lost time. So, paying attention to that, it is likely that we are going to minimize the lost time in the classroom and access our Terrier time extra help at the end of the day to make this happen. There's not enough time to pull it off in that half hour that we have, so we may have to steal a little bit of time for fourth block, but that's better than stealing 45 minutes of instructional time from English or math.
Mm-hmm.
I will say on the content side, the Algebra 1 test or the geometry test or the Algebra 2 test, we paid attention to that at coordinators. So the Algebra 1 that we offer in one semester really doesn't have 45 minutes to lose.
Mm-hmm.
The Algebra 1 that we offer in 2 semesters, this testing fits much better into that, and that will give us enough students to be able to kind of evaluate what we're doing programmatically. The geometry that we offer in 2 semesters, same thing. And this year we aren't offering a single semester Algebra 2, so the Algebra 2 is in 2 parts. So, I mean, you're asking the right questions, and I feel like we've been paying close attention to that balance of gathering information so we can improve programming versus lost instructional time.
And it is, is what you understand too, it's not like the SBAC test. It's really low stakes testing where designed for each test is just only take 45 minutes. Right. If this was another SBAC, it wouldn't have been a program that we wanted to look at.
That's Smarter Balance Assessment Consortium. That's the
state.
That's the state testing. So.
Is that in May?
That we do in May, and that we do end up losing a good amount of instructional time. But it's how the state measures how well we do, so we want to make sure that we schedule that in a way that gets us the right amount, and there's a lot more testing associated with that, but gets us the best possible results.
Chris, what's the frequency on the MAPS testing?
beginning of the year, middle of the year, end of the year.
Thank you.
Anything else on that? So that's what we got going for the MAPS testing. You have heard us talk really over the last year and a half or so about going in a one-to-one computing device direction, as in instead of having a computer lab or a bank of computers, that there's a lot of efficiencies gained through having students with their own device that the school provides for them. And we've been talking about that quite a bit. I just want to let you know we're probably in a place to roll that out before the end of next month. So stand by for that. And the last thing that I'll mention to you is NEASC is coming around again. So I briefly mentioned it last spring that John Broadley, Lynn Carey, and myself went to an accreditation workshop for schools that are about to re-enter the accreditation process. And I'm going to read just the beginning of this letter here to you. Dear Mr. Hodgson, the application for your school's decennial accreditation visit, yes, that happens every 10 years, has been processed, and we have scheduled Bellows Falls Union High School for a visiting team on Sunday, November 13th, 2022, through Wednesday, November 16th, 2022. Those schools preparing for their self-reflection for an on-site accreditation visit in 2022 will engage in a process that is different in many ways from the process which the school may be familiar with from previous experiences. These changes will enable schools to take advantage of technology, changing protocols, and revised standards that will concentrate the school's resources, reduce the professional development time needed for the self-reflection process, and fully integrate the accreditation process with the school's growth plans for learners. Representatives from your school, usually the principal, and 2 other faculty members who were chosen as to be the school's accreditation coordinators should have attended an accreditation seminar this spring, which we did, as I just mentioned, at which the new standards and process were explained. So, what does that mean for us? That means that along with a lot of the professional development that has been scheduled, between now and the middle of the spring, we'll be doing this self-reflection, which will require staff members to work in committees, 5 different committees, all related to NEASC standards, to walk through a process designed by NEASC to do a self-reflection. How do we see ourselves doing on those 5 standards? So you can expect to hear reporting out on that, really, particularly over the next, 6 to 8 months, but really between now and November 13th of 2022.
Can you talk a little bit about the resources you have now in the building between, special ed and restorative?
Oh, yes. So, reaching back to the restorative practices piece, in addition to the training that our staff has, Jesse Hall, as a restorative practice coordinator, has an office in our building. He's really kind of splitting his time between us and the middle school. What we have done at the SU level is kind of taken a number of resources that have been available to us and kind of brought it under this one department, you might say. So we've had an SAP counselor. Her name is Heather Warius. She, a lot of the work she does really falls nicely into this restorative practices piece. So she is kind of a part of that department. Amber Sanderson is our home to school liaison. She also is at the building level, kind of on that restorative practices team, and we've expanded Ian Fraunfelder's position from 3/4 to full-time through grant money that was available to also take on more of a school safety role. I have seen it as a great opportunity, although I will say this is one of those ships that we are building while it's underway. So we are figuring out as we go the best strategies for using that. But just today, there was a restorative opportunity for Jesse to get involved with what one might call a typical cafeteria issue. There was no fight involved, but there was some disagreement over a phone between a couple of students that was taken on in a restorative way and didn't really result. I think it resulted in the students have a better understanding of where each one was coming from, but it did not result in anyone in ISS or out of school suspension. So yes, I think it's moving us in a good direction.
Good. Thank you. Anyone have any questions, Mr. Hodgson? Edie, business manager.
Yeah, I saw this on here when I got my agenda, and I was a little surprised. We normally do this your second meeting of the month, and I'm guessing because you aren't meeting the second meeting a month, it got moved up. I can tell you we're close, but with losing the accountant and the new wonderful state software that we're still fighting with, and the merger, we haven't quite got the end of year budget done, but we should have it soon. We're getting really close. It's just there's a couple of weird things that the problem is that we actually ended the year with 2 general ledgers, and when I suggested we not do that, the former accountant was like, not a problem, we can handle it. But then she left. So the new person has really done an amazing job trying to figure this out. But we have to take Tyler and merge it with e-finance because the auditors are going to want one general ledger. But we have to make sure that nothing's missed, nothing's duplicated. And it's been quite an experience to have this. I can say the software is still causing us fits, but the state has now decided that we do need some training. Where before they gave us videos, before they gave us the software. The videos were anywhere from 2 to 6 hours a piece. And there were tons and tons, pages and pages of videos. But without the software, we had no reference point. There was no way to make any kind of a connection. You can't learn an accounting software by looking at videos. They've now cleaned up the videos, so they're now a reasonable amount of time. The problem is, since we went live January 1st, they have, in March, they added project codes that they want us to use, and then they changed the chart of account again. So we've already trying to merge 2 separate charts of accounts that look nothing alike. And when I build the budget for next year, that chart of account that we're starting to get used to is going to change again.
As long as it's black ink that you use at the end of that whole process, then
I tell you, it has been the worst experience of my career.
Yeah.
I think when they picked the software, one thing, the price was good. Secondly, it was going to be easy for them to grab data from their side. I don't think they ever stopped to think about how we were going to implement something that is, it has so many bells and whistles. But it's also so very different than anything I've ever used. And this is my 4th software conversion. And I have never struggled like this. I also have never been on my own. The people in my office have been awesome. They're resilient. They're hanging in there. I think we've all grayed a lot more. But it's really tough without a trainer because there's so many places to go, so many options. And it's just slow, it's cumbersome. The modules don't talk to each other. They're supposed to be fixing that too. We can't even do a bank rec off the software. We can only pull in AP, it won't pull in payroll. So we have to manually pull in payroll and write it down by hand and basically use the paper the bank gives us to balance. And they've got a lot of problems with this software, but it's the one that got the bid, so.
Go ahead, Jack.
Couple things. Have you had, I know that the SU authorized you to add a staffer. Has there been any progress in that regard?
I
yet?
haven't had a chance to even look into that.
That's fine. The second question actually has to do with the software, because I've taken little peeks at pieces of it, and some of our other folks who have a little bit of tech knowledge have too. There's a couple of things that are really weird about this whole thing, and really do require somebody at the legislature needs to look at it, because this is kind of scandalous. Not only is there chunks of the code that are ancient by IT standards, I mean absolutely ancient, unforgivable. But also, when you do a beta project, and I've run beta programs, fairly big ones, you always make certain that you have on-site trainers for your beta testers. That's an employee that the company or the state should be paying for. And we're not getting that. We are spending 6 figures in overtime at this point for a program that we are being handed, where there is no on-site trainer during the beta process. They need that in order to write the code properly to fix it, to take it out of beta. That process has not happened. When this rolls out to the rest of the world, there is no assurance at the state level that this will be any better for the other folks in the state that will be taking it on than we have experienced, and that is going to cause a statewide uproar, and it won't be a small one, nor should it be. It's scandalous. Now, the other thing that you may not, Edie knows, but maybe the rest of you don't know, is when you have fundamentally different accounting systems, especially when they don't use what's called generally accepted accounting practices, when it's a specialty and when it's non-compliant with federal standards, which this is.
Yep.
It means that that when this is rolled over to the CPAs who are supposed to look at this, they're going to have a fit, and they should, because you need to be able to map every single expenditure, every single receipt from one system to another, and you have to show the logic by which that has happened. And that process all by itself is more work than the conversion is, and that hasn't happened yet. And there that is for everybody
We're
to think
working
about.
on it.
I know you are, but it's ridiculous that you have to be. This should be part of the package. The fact that it's not compliant with federal standards alone makes my head spin. But the fact that you're going to be taking this off, sending it to an auditor in this form where it's essentially non-auditable without heroic effort, and it's not compliant, and it's beta. And we're going to and in a month, we're going to have to start to be using some iteration of this to do budgets. Hello. I've spoken to a couple members of the Finance Committee on the legislature, at least giving them a heads up that this is a thing. And I really hope that the Vermont Superintendent Association, the pair of you, the business managers, need to get before the legislature, because this is a disaster. It was absolutely predictable, and it's just worked out even worse than we thought. And I thought we would be having these kind of conversations when it was first rolled out, and we really need to. This isn't something where we need to politely ask what's wrong. We need to be yelling.
Thank you, Jack. Any other questions for Edie?
So I will get this to you as soon as I can. Like I said, we're close. So, what I'm working on now, Teresa's going through and verifying the 2 general ledgers for the high school, making sure she's got the crosswalk all mapped for the auditors. And I'm working on the SU assessments so we can allocate any surpluses back to the schools. So, because that'll all go back into the school budgets. So that needs to be done before the school budgets are finalized. But yeah, this has been tough. We do have a trainer coming the first week in October, finally. And hopefully, I've dealt with her on the phone, and she seems to be very, very knowledgeable. So she's coming from Texas. So, but at least we're going to have somebody, and we're going to have them in-house, and we're going to be able to get some help. But there were 3 of us that went live January 1st, 7 more went live July 1st, and they had considerable more training. We didn't have any, but they actually had training before they went live in July. But every school district in Vermont has to be on this software by July 1 of 2022. That is the drop dead date.
So you had a beta. So you were kind of like a beta 1, and these people coming on in July were like a beta 2, and where it's at least they built some of the support software to or instructionware to make the thing.
Yeah, and I did get a call from Power School saying that they're working on the software, trying to make it so the modules integrate and talk to one another. And I'm thinking that would have been wonderful if you'd done that first.
Basic stuff.
But I don't know. I thought it was a good idea. I thought it gave me 18 months to make sure the books were in good shape. And if I probably had known a little more about the software, I should have waited until everybody else went live and see how it worked.
But I think it's important
Thank
for
you.
people to understand too, the chaos with payroll is directly tied to this e-finance software.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's not that you got a new superintendent and all of a sudden people aren't getting paid.
No.
No matter what we're still
No.
saying that, but we're just, you know.
But it's
Well, one
important.
school district, it paid them the whole annual salary for the year.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah.
And we took screenshots, and they're identical. So what caused one school to print out that, and then they had to be manually adjusted? Every single employee had to be manually
We're working
adjusted.
as hard as we can to make sure that it's trying to go as smooth as possible. But when every time you turn around, there's something else with the software, or when you don't have training, and usually it's like Jock talked about. You usually have the training to say, oh, okay, we know what's wrong with it, we can fix it. But when you don't have the training, it's going to take you a few times before you get to the point where you can fix it. And in the meantime, other things are going wrong because you're trying to figure it out as you go. And it's been an absolute nightmare in regards to payroll and everything else. But we're working as hard as we can to make sure that this next on Friday when the payroll goes out again, is that people are going to get paid on time. It's the last thing we want, but
Well, the thing that makes me nuts, and the reason you know it's not even a beta quality product, is not to geek out about this, but there is this thing called, you have these underlying databases, and the whole point of them is to make certain these pieces talk to each other. And in order for that problem, the kind of problem you're talking about, to show up, this is like a 1990s era kind of problem.
Yep.
That's how old some of the fundamental core is in the software.
and that's the reason why all of a sudden, we're getting ready to, we think everything's fine, we're getting ready to press print and getting payroll, and all of a sudden, the system's saying, oh, all of a sudden, this part of the system is not talking to this part of the system, and it might even change some stuff, and now it sets us back a day or two of work that we got to get done in a half day. That's the frustration that we're finding.
Everything has been reactive since we got this. We can't get far enough ahead to be proactive on anything. And you have to learn a second piece of software in order to run a report.
Yeah,
It doesn't even run a report. I'm like, what do you mean it doesn't run a report?
This is patchwork. This is
You
not-
need to get into another software and then pull from the database. Well, unless you really understand that database, you aren't going to know where to go hunting for it. And then you have to build the reports from scratch. And everything I've heard, Cognos is a good program. However, I don't know eFinance's database. I mean, I've gone in there, I spent 2 days in training, and I finally got through one report. I'm like, I haven't got 2 days to spend building a report. It's insane. And I love the fact that when you download from eFinance to Excel, it goes into Excel 2003.
That tells you
Well,
right there.
I have Excel 2016, and it doesn't like Excel 2003 at all.
Well, that's because you got a platform that was written 15 years ago.
Yeah.
Edie, thank you for working so hard.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank my staff, because I tell you, I'm surprised they haven't all left me.
How about policy committee updates? We're all set there?
We're all set. We're gonna
Okay.
hopefully on the 25th get some work done.
Mr. Clark, would you like to give us
I brought my agenda, so I had the prompts, and I think I can do it briefly. The two major items at the SU meeting, and this has already been alluded to, the SU board did decide that we needed another staffer in the business office, and allocated funding, which at this point is likely to be deficit funding, to support that position. The other thing worth knowing is that you have new legal counsel for the district in the person of the law firm Lynn, Blackman, and Manitsky. Stitzel and Page is no longer with us. That's the bad news. The good news is that there's a fairly high confidence level, I believe, in the SU office, because our superintendent has worked with Pietro Lynn's firm before. So I'm presuming that's been a fairly seamless transition.
Thank you.
That's it.
Any unfinished business?
I do not have any.
New business? How about appointments?
No.
No appointments.
No executive session?
No executive session.
Director's comments? Brenda?
No, I'm all set.
Priscilla?
All set, thank you.
Stephen?
A couple things. One, the Westminster Conservation Commission had a grant put together on flood resiliency of vulnerable wetlands, which I wish to get to Sue Steiner. Is that get that to you to get to Sue Steiner, so she can use it on her environmental science. Environmental, thank you. And second, I did reflect, as I often do driving in, that even I, who aren't, not terribly keen on pavement, think that we are long overdue when paving. And I mean, I'm really not keen on pavement. I like driving horses on dirt roads, just don't like pavement at all. But this pavement needs doing.
That's been a high priority on the
and
last.
and I know we own that. Westminster doesn't own
Okay.
it. But when
We'll wait for
Westminster
you.
does a paving job, they clearly get state money to assist with that. As we approach the budget season this year, it may take some working through the state transportation agencies to find out how they can support other municipalities like our Union High School in paving roads so that we could get the same degree of support that a town can doing, because it is gargantuanly expensive if we don't do that, and the towns do paving with at least considerable degree of state support. I hope we can work on that as we go into the budget season, because I remember John Doty complaining about it years and years and years ago, and so I think it's a fine idea.
Okay.
The rest of the building looks pretty polished, but that doesn't.
Thank you. Colin?
Following up with that real quick, that would be something that the Buildings and Grounds Committee could discuss too. Have we reached out to, let me rephrase that, it's only your second week of school. I know that last year we did have student reps for a brief period of time. Is that something that you would want to reach
I'm
out
happy to
once
revisit
you
that.
get
I will tell you that it played out pretty much the way it always plays out. I am happy to go back to student council, but, and I understand why it plays out the way it does, but you have students who are initially enamored with the idea of joining the board. Come initially, we work very hard at the building level to support their participation, have conversations with them about the meetings, what's coming up, go over the agenda. But the reality is, and it's not even so much
something I
about.
wanted you to reach out to.
I will,
completely
but
understand where you're
don't
going.
get your hopes up.
I'm not. I just
It does get
something
boring.
I wanted you to reach out to,
Well, and
even
they're
if it was
busy.
once
They're
a
busy.
month.
And they get
you
more
know,
busy.
And
Yeah.
I know they're busy. Even
So
if it
I
was
honestly
just
don't
once a
nag them
month.
after they
People
stop
development
coming, to be
since
honest. No,
That's fine. I
There's
just
a certain guilt trip that then happens.
But like go right
So-
hand in hand with the finance.
Okay.
Thank you.
Deb?
Education practice.
Really, I'm scared of my cold. I just can't think of anything.
David?
Well, I have 3 comments. I'll try to be brief. Number one, I don't regard that as a deteriorating driveway, Stephen. I regard that as a traffic calming device. So I'm not in favor of paving it.
Love to stop people. Yeah.
Secondly, since I'm on a roll here, I feel very strongly that if we're going to have student reps, they ought to come off the in-school suspension list so that we get some feedback from the part of our clientele that maybe is not entirely happy with the way things work in the building. It would certainly be insightful in my judgment. And number 3, I'm going to suggest that perhaps when we get to the SU table again, we should have a serious discussion about whether we want to recover damages from the software company that has caused us an untold amount of grief and a great deal of expense, and I am completely serious in that. I think, if nothing else, that will focus the attention statewide on what is a very, very serious and costly matter for the school districts. Thank you.
Thank you. Jack? How are you gonna follow up on that one?
Well, he ate some of my scheme on this. Little story. Cognos Software used to be a Canadian company. I consulted for them. They have not done any serious development since IBM bought them in 2006. Their modules have never been tied together, still aren't. They don't market an educational practice. And the reason IBM bought them was because the state of Massachusetts was one of their early contractors. And the process by which they got the bid to be the IT platform for the state of Massachusetts was so scandal-ridden that there are 2 people that went to jail as a consequence. It's not really the sort of company that I would recommend for this type of thing, because as I said, they don't have a standard education module. You really are building one for them out of material that hasn't been updated since 2006. I really cannot state strongly enough the level of wrong here. And I tend to agree with David that it's time that you all complain and you stick the legislature onto this, because this is a bad thing.
Margot? Agenda items for next board meeting. If anyone has anything, they can email Chris or I, and we'll work on that. The date of next board meeting, October 14th. I declare this meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Cognitive analytics still doesn't work with their base.